Hello out there. Welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan. Together we're going through the books of the Bible a little bit every day. You all right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. A little bit every day. And we'll be reading from the Robert Alter translation. Today I'm reading Genesis 41:53 through Genesis 42:18, and then we will discuss it afterwards. And the 7 years of plenty that had been in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. And there was a famine in all the lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. And all the land of Egypt was hungry, and all the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all of Egypt, "Go to Joseph. What he says to you, you must do." And the famine was over all the land, and Joseph laid open whatever had grain within, and sold provisions to Egypt. And the famine grew harsh in the land of Egypt. And all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to get provisions, for the famine had grown harsh in all the earth. Sorry, chapter 42. And Jacob saw there were provisions in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, "Why are you fearful?" And he said, "Look, I have heard that there are provisions in Egypt. Go down there and get us provisions from there, and we may live and not die." And the 10 brothers of Joseph went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob did not send with his brothers, for he thought lest harm befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy provisions among those who came, for there was famine in the land of Canaan. As for Joseph, he was regent of the land. He was the provider to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed to him, their faces to the ground. And Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, and he played the stranger to them, and spoke harshly to them, and said to them, "Where have you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams he had dreamed about them, and he said to them, "You are spies, to see the land's nakedness you have come." And they said to him, "No, my lord, for your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. We are honest. Your servants would never be spies." And he said to them, "No, for the land's nakedness you have come to see." And they said, 12 brothers your servants are. We are the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And look, the youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. And Joseph said to them, "That's just what I told you. You are spies. In this shall you be tested by Pharaoh. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here." We're just going to leave it there. Wow, those
Verse 15 is where it ends.
it's where it ends. Those Jewish ancestors of ours really do love to play up the serial like cliffhanger. It reminds me of like old Flash Gordon serials or something. But it does keep you interested, right? They know how to play up the narrative. So it begins, and things have shifted. So the famine has arrived, and it's spreading, and all of this. What kind of comments come to mind as you're looking through all of this?
Well, he still has this favoritism towards Rachel, and now the favoritism is towards Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, but fortunately, I guess the brothers are willing to put up with it. Well, for one thing, Benjamin hasn't, maybe, snitched on them and told them about dreams, so they're not as,
Benjamin?
yeah, so
Yeah.
they're not angry with Benjamin like they were with Joseph.
It
but he,
doesn't seem like it
but he's
anyway.
still, but he's still, and they may have matured too, but
Yeah.
he's still concerned with the last remaining son of Rachel, and because Joseph had that problem, he doesn't want Benjamin to he's still watching out for Rachel's children.
Yeah. Now, this is where you get into that biblical literary style that you have to be careful about sometimes, because you have "and all the earth came to Egypt and grown harsh in all the earth."
Yeah,
That doesn't necessarily mean every last place, like
right.
you know
Sorry,
that there
never
was
mind.
famine in Antarctica. I mean,
Yeah,
there should be. It's a desert, but you know what I mean. Like, that's
right.
obviously not what it's getting at, because the next sentence after that is talking about Jacob in another area. So what it's trying to tell you is that it's spreading throughout a large region, the region that we are concerned about for the sake of this story. In the same way that when you read, I'm just going to give a random example, Lord of the Rings, it doesn't deal with anything beyond the level of Middle Earth. What is exactly going to happen? Like, where is all this? It's not necessary for that story. So, um, and I know people might get irritated that I'm comparing the Bible to fantasy, but I'm just saying from a literary standpoint, people do that all the time. And we say that too. It's like, everybody knows that. Well, that doesn't mean every last person knows that. It's an expression, right? So you have to just, and if a guy from the pulpit says, everybody knows this, he's not a liar because he uses that expression because people know what that expression means. Everybody knows what that expression means. But so yeah, so we have the famine, and then Jacob hears about the fact that Egypt has provisions, and then what's interesting though is when he sends them, he does not send Benjamin with them, which two reasons why. Obviously, he's very concerned about Benjamin, holds him close, but you do wonder, is he a little bit suspicious about what happened? Maybe because he doesn't really, or maybe he doesn't exactly still trust them because I mean, they did do a lousy job in a sense the last time, right? So it could be that that's just not something he's wanting to saddle them with, because even if it's the slightest bit of doubt, he might not want to for that reason. I'm
Yeah, I
just
don't
wondering.
think they ever told their father what they did.
Doesn't seem like it,
Well, I was noticing here.
because it just says here in this translation, lest harm befall him, but it doesn't say what kind.
Um, but it's interesting. They make a comment that one is no more, or
Mm-hmm.
one is not. I think when we
Yeah,
discussed
one is not is I think a
what Alter
translation.
says. Well, here's the
I
thing.
think he says no more. Hold on.
But they
One is no more. Yeah.
they they w- they still maintain that.
He says it's a euphemism. Literally, it's not. He doesn't think that they're trying to tell them he's dead. He
Oh,
says we don't
really?
know where he is. That's what he says. Yep.
Wow. So he says they're being honest. To me, it's like they're perpetuating the lie that he's dead. But okay, I'll go with Robert Alter on this. That they're
Oh
trying to.
no no no! Wait, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. He says they use the euphemism is no more to indicate that Joseph is dead. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
And I think they're perpetuating this lie
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know that. Well,
Yeah.
it's not a lie
I've heard
exactly.
both interpretations though. That's why I got mixed up. Earlier I was reading interpretation that people said it's not is a it is just we don't know what happened, He's not part of our lives anymore and that they're fudging, you know, cuz
Well,
they literally didn't know what happened to him.
well, in one sense, that could go back to earlier
I
with
mean, they're
Enoch.
not they're not admitting what they did. That's obvious, right? But they may not be trying to tell him he's dead. They could just be saying, "Well, we don't know what happened to him."
Yeah, I think, and now I'm beginning to think that way because Enoch, it says that he was not because God took him,
Hmm.
and most people think that means somehow I don't know, bodily
Well, it depends.
yeah,
Yes.
but I mean yeah,
We
but
would think that he
no,
was.
no,
It was like Elijah. He
he
was.
was
He
yeah,
was
he was taken.
divinely
Well,
protected.
he was taken away
Yeah.
evidently to protect him,
Hmm.
and so there we see that in other words, we don't know what happened to him. He was
Right.
not because nobody knew what happened to him.
Right.
So that's probably the point here.
Hmm. I mean, if you want to give them a better read, which like I tend to do,
Yeah,
they're not really perpetuating the lie. They're not really revealing all their hand. But I
right,
mean, is it
right.
really his business?
No,
That
no,
anyway,
no.
they're being coy.
Right,
Fair
yeah,
enough. I,
right,
I think that's reasonable. I don't
yeah.
I don't think it's that bad. However, he does take it wrong because he wants to have that public admission of guilt. So he's looking at it from that standpoint.
Oh, you
Oh,
mean
somebody
Joseph?
commented they also could have thought that he might have been dead. That's true
Yeah,
because I don't know slaves were always treated that well. So it's very possible. They literally don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, they literally don't know. So
yeah. But why would he be dead at 30?
I
Yeah.
mean, people probably mistreated slaves enough to kill them from time to time. I mean, obviously you want to usually treat your
Oh,
property
right.
better, but he was a
I
slave.
want to defend the person who thought that they thought
Mm-hmm.
that maybe he was dead because they hadn't heard from him.
Right.
Why didn't he let them know? Why
Yeah.
didn't he let his dad know he was
Uh-huh.
still alive?
Right.
So that's
Well,
a
is it that easy for a slave to like send a letter?
well,
Is
no,
that
but
really a thing back then?
no, but he was an overseer for Potiphar.
But they didn't know that.
No, but he could have he could
Yeah,
have
but you're saying they would have thought he was dead because he didn't contact them, but why would they think he could contact them?
Well, at least the possibility was there. He could have contacted them. I
Hmm.
understand it might have not been a normal thing, but
Yeah.
on the other hand, the fact that he
It
hadn't,
is interesting that he
yeah,
never did, right?
yeah,
Especially in the light of famine.
right.
He was in a
That's a
sense
very good
he
point.
was
Yeah,
in a sense angry enough with the situation that he didn't reach out to them to bail them out. They had to come to him.
yeah,
That which is interesting
yeah, that is,
because he had to know that their area was being affected.
yeah, that's a good, yeah, that's right.
But I mean, he didn't have any relationship with Benjamin really because he was a baby, I think, right at the time where everything happened, or very young.
He
And
was
then
very
he
young.
doesn't even know if his father's alive. So
Yeah,
you know, and obviously he doesn't like his brothers very much.
yeah. He might have assumed his father had died because
Hmm.
his father would have been quite old. Although Abraham and Isaac had lived longer, so
Yeah,
it's a good question.
yeah. It does shade Joseph a little bit. It
Hmm.
makes you know.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people overdo it with the deification of Joseph.
Well,
Uh,
yeah. Well, yeah.
honestly, like I've been to Sunday schools, and they're like he was so humble he couldn't imagine having power, and he's just this goody two shoes, and it's like and even when his brothers came back, he was so forgiving. It's like, yeah, but he also tested them, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but like let's be
No,
realistic
no.
about these characters.
As I read this, I was rather disappointed with him in a
Yeah, he
way.
comes across really harsh right from the
Yeah.
get-go, right?
Yeah.
But he has a right in a sense. I mean, he doesn't know if they've changed. This is
Yeah.
the thing
Right.
is that, the common and we'll get to this, but the common Christian belief is like the right thing you do when somebody does something really horrible to you is you just say, I don't care. I just forgive you. And that is not the
That's
biblical
not
example.
appropriate.
There's a very big difference between holding a grudge against somebody. That's not a good idea. But you do not need to go out of your way to forgive somebody who's unrepentant. That's not even necessarily helpful for them.
Yeah. They're supposed to
Right.
recognize they did
Mhm.
you wrong, and then
Yeah.
you forgive them.
Correct.
Yeah.
It even says that in the New Testament. It says if
Yeah.
somebody sins against you, you rebuke them, and then if they come to you for
Yeah.
forgiveness, then you forgive them. It doesn't say that you have to necessarily. And I'm not saying it's anything that's necessarily wrong. Sometimes what somebody needs that's really incorrigible is somebody to say, you know what, I can get over this, and then that'll be the first step. But I will say to demand that of you, which is what evangelicals do a lot, is wrong, and it's actually not beneficial to
Well,
society.
see, in the case of the crowd that was yelling "Crucify him," he said, "They know not what they do,"
Yeah, but
because they didn't know.
right. That's yeah, right.
No, I
They
mean,
didn't know what they did.
I'm
Right.
I'm
What if they did know what they did?
yeah, no, right. If that's the thing. They
Mm-hmm.
they were acting without really knowing what they
Right.
were doing.
Mm-hmm. There's
Okay.
a qualifier there that's important, and
Yeah,
that's if you even accept
yeah.
that
No,
belongs in the
I'm
text.
conceding that. I'm using the Talmudic tradition of litai me. Let's assume it's there,
Yeah.
and therefore, right.
Yeah. I'm just looking at some of these comments. Perhaps the way he was taken, they thought he was going to a bad place. It's very true. It's very true. I mean, slaves usually were
uh,
not treated all that well, so yes, um, for sure. What's interesting, though, is that he does figure out from here that his father is still alive, so that's interesting. And then the immediate thing he does is he tests them by asking them their youngest brother come there, right? Which there's a principle like Maimonides talks about this, and other people have talked about it, that the way that you can most truly show repentance is if you find yourself in the exact same scenario, and then instead of sinning in that scenario, you do the right thing. And essentially, that's exactly what Joseph is about to do to test them. Does this mean this is always the way that we should behave ourselves to check somebody's repentance? I don't think so. But it is understandable why he does that in this
so we
situation.
have what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. The dream was that
Right.
the brothers would bow to him, so he's got to get that last one down there, to make sure that
That's what it is. That's funny. It's true, though.
he thought of the dream. It says, doesn't it? Doesn't it say he thought of the dream when he
I
saw
didn't
them?
even think of it like that. That's
Yeah,
really
he
interesting.
thought of the dream when he saw them, and the dream was that all of them would be bowing.
Wait, where is that? Hold on.
Yeah. The
It
sheaves.
is interesting that nobody recognized him. However, keep in mind he was 17 when he was sold, He's now 39-ish, I think, if you do the math, because he's 37. But there was 2 years after, because it says 2 years after he told Pharaoh.
He was 30. No, he was
He was
31.
30 at that point, and then it says 2 years passed, and then there was the 7 years, and so this is somewhere in that. So he's at least 39, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah. So that's quite different, right? And then also, yes, he looked different in his glory. Also, he might have been shaved. He might have had a shaved head or a very unusual hairstyle. And then later, we're going to find out that he spoke Egyptian to a
Right.
translator. He didn't even speak to them directly.
Right. And of course,
And so
they had no anticipation of seeing him either.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people not recognizing people for who they are. We were talking about that with the with Tamar and Leah, right? That's a common thing in the Bible, but I think it's more common. I think we give ourselves too much credit for recognizing people. I think people are not as recognizable as
I had a
think.
horrible
Especially,
situation.
let's be honest, the genetic diversity in that era was not the same as it is now either. There probably was much more similarity in the way people looked. And I mean, you can point to some countries that don't have the same genetic diversity of, like, for example, us in
Yeah,
America,
but he was not
and people just
Egyptian.
look more similar to each
But
other.
he was not Egyptian.
No, but I don't know how different Egyptians look than Hebrews at that point. There's debate about that.
Yeah.
Egyptologists will debate that fact. Yeah.
I was going to say I had a horrible situation where I was giving a talk recently, and a very close friend of mine in the crowd made a comment, and I didn't recognize him from where I was standing.
That's
You
true.
know,
That just happened.
And
Yeah.
I said, this
It
gentleman,
was so funny too
a very
because
close friend.
because, because he's like that gentleman in the hat or whatever it was, and I was like, I thought that was this guy. Dr. Merritt was his name, who's actually written a very interesting book about with a pronomian perspective about where life begins, which is it's very interesting read.
So anyway, later on, when I spoke with him, he was very, very kind about it. He said, "Well, I've lost weight and I've shaved," and whatever he said, you know,
And
which was
he's really
well, it's
thinking,
probably
wow, Mark, you're really slipping.
it's probably true. I mean, he probably had lost a lot of weight.
No, honestly,
Yeah.
I wasn't 100% sure too, but I was like, that can't be who I think it is because my dad is referring to him as if he doesn't know. And I'm like, or maybe he's playing up that whole, like, it's a random person in the audience. And
No, anyway, very embarrassing.
But yeah, no, that sort of stuff happens. That's for sure. I've had same situation. There's actually a term in a language, I think it's like Swedish, which doesn't have an English equivalent, which is somebody you recognize but you don't know why. It's a very helpful word too. I wish we had it in English.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we don't have a word for that concept. Another thing about language, right? There's not exact matches, and that's one reason why we have the fun with Robert Alter with stuff is because, there's not always an exact equivalent. All right, so do you want to put the audience out of its misery and find out what happens next?
Okay.
Are they going to send the youngest brother? If you've seen Joseph Who Made the Color Dreamcoat or you've read the story before, you know what happens. But if you haven't, that's fine. It's a great year to read the law. So like, subscribe, hit the bell, call your friends up. We will read it together, and we will see you tomorrow.
So we're in verse